Welcome, my friends, to the Sage Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. The following interview with Neil Sanders was recorded back in 2019. Neil's insights into the surveillance state and mass mind control will undoubtedly be an eye-opener to those who still subscribe to the left-right paradigm. And so without further ado, here's the show with Neil. Well, folks, we have a great show. Neil Sanders is back with us this afternoon. It's always great to have Neil with us. He is a wealth of information, and his research goes very, very deep. Today, we're going to talk about the deep state, think tanks, politics, religion, and how they are all in bed together. And I think we're going to start with Cambridge Analytica first, which is a data mining corporation. And obviously, for those that have been following their connection to Facebook, we can then make ties into what Facebook is all about as well. So with that, Neil, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This is going to be an eye-opener for a lot of people because even though some folks believe they understand the surveillance state and the technology behind the surveillance state, I'm not really sure many are aware of really how deep it goes.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me back, Mike. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, Cambridge Analytica. Shall I just dive in?
Yes, dive right in with Cambridge.
What they are is a data mining psychographics company that offers psychological warfare operations to be based or directed at civilian populations. When for the bidding of for the price of the highest bidder, and it's insane. Their logo is data-driven behavior change, and what they do is they boast of being able to determine the outcome of elections, and that's not by forecasting it or guessing it. It's by providing a propaganda campaign, a secret clandestine propaganda campaign that will direct people in a certain way by using either fear or anger. And so what they will do is they'll create stories, but it goes a lot deeper than that. They were originally a company called SCL, and it was started by a bloke called Nigel Oakes, who used to knock around with minor royals and has confessed in the past to being an MI5 spy. And what they were doing was they were applying psychological methods of manipulation. He was in advertising, really, but what they decided was that they figured out that if you can use sort of psychological manipulation and using, basically making people frightened or making people angry, you can manipulate them. You can get them into a fight or flight state where they're going to be more easily directed into a certain pattern of behavior. And he started basically using this to overthrow elections and to create, as I say, campaigns whereby and everybody would be convinced of a certain state of affairs that wasn't necessarily happening. The first time that they actually got sort of involved with the UK government, this was when they were still SCL. This was at some sort of trade fair, and what they offered to the UK government was they said that we can convince the public of the UK that there's been a major explosion at a chemical factory down south somewhere. This won't have actually happened, but we'll be able to convince them with news media and trickery that this event has actually happened. And that was the way that the British government went, brilliant, that just sounds really good. So since then they've had loads and loads of contracts with the MOD, the Pentagon, Department of Defence, NATO and various other people like that. They hold what's called a List X clearance. A List X clearance is where you can hold British governments or intelligence documents marked secret and higher. So top secret, classified, all of that. They have access to British intelligence documents and details of spies, details of operations, details of everything that's going on like that. Furthermore, it came out in the court case because Cambridge Analytica, as we'll come on to, was used illegally by the Leave campaigns and semi-legally by Donald Trump. In order to get them elected. Now, what came out during this court case was that Cambridge Analytica was a weapon of British intelligence. It was considered weapons-grade communication tactics and was under export control. And Brittany Kaiser, who's the lady who was testifying, clarified that this meant that they would have to check before its tactics and methodology was deployed anywhere in the world. Now, she didn't clarify exactly who she had to check with or who they had to check with. But very recently, Theresa May got under bother because we've been selling weapons to Saudi Arabia and they've been used to murder people in Yemen. And she justified this by saying, no, there's no way that anything's being done without our knowledge because we have the tightest export controls in the Western world. If that's the case, what that means is that any campaign that's utilised Cambridge Analytica or Cambridge Analytica's methodology or its weapons-grade communication tactics has had to say so from the British government or members of the British government and members of the British intelligence services. On the board, you can see that of this company, they're connected to all the sort of big hitters like Marconi Defence Systems and British military intelligence, British psychological intelligence, the Pentagon, US Marines. They've got people in there loads and loads of people like Jonathan Wheatlands, who used to be the treasurer for the treasurer for a part of the Conservative Party. They've got a huge amount of right-wing Conservative lords. Sir Geoffrey Patty's on there. Ivor Mountbatten's on the board. He's the cousin to the Queen or something, and he worked on her Privy Council. So essentially, you can see that the board of this company, as well as sort of the methodology being a weapon of British intelligence, it's littered with British establishment, very right-wing, aristocratic British establishment, and also connected to defence systems with our allies across the world. So that would be, America, and also an arm of it goes to Israel. So how did this get used? Well, there was two campaigns for the Leave for the EU referendum, which happened a couple of years ago. The campaigns to Leave were Vote Leave and Leave.eu. Vote Leave was the official government campaign, and Leave.eu was the unofficial, bit zany, bit wacky one that wasn't afraid to lie. As it transpired, they both ended up lying. Now, for Leave.eu, Aaron Banks donated £8 million, over £8 million to this campaign, which is an incredibly huge amount of money. It was found that actually the Leave campaign overspent, and they were taken to court for it. But strangely, nothing was done about it because this is a weapon of the British government. So if they're not going to expose themselves more than they actually have to. So how does this work? Well, what they did was that in 2013 or 2013 or 2012, I can't remember, Robert Mercer, who is an American billionaire, who's a hedge fund manager, his daughter's named Rebecca Mercer, and they're connected with artificial intelligence and a group called Renaissance Technologies. They've made billions and billions from hedge fund management, but he's very, very right wing. He basically had to give up his stake with Mercer International and let his daughter take it over because it was revealed that he'd made remarks like he yearned for an all-white America and that he felt that black people shouldn't live in America and that they were better off with slavery and various things like that. So he leans a little to the right. So Robert Mercer in 2013 invested a huge amount of money into SCL and turned the company into Cambridge Analytica and hired people like Alexander Nix and Mike Turnbull. And these are the people that would be later trapped by Channel 4 News, where they were saying that they would do honey traps and they would bribe politicians and give them fake jobs like £2 million a year to work for this company and then expose that this company's got like dodgy links, just really, really dirty, underhanded blackmail techniques that they would use to undermine candidates and such like that. And this was exposed by Channel 4 News. But anyway, so Robert Mercer also put a huge amount of money into Breitbart. Now, not a lot of people know this. With his friend Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon used to work for Goldman Sachs for many, many years. He's an incredibly dodgy character. Anyway, with Mercer's money, Bannon created a semi-legal fund called GAI. And with that, he was able to funnel money into Breitbart via two places. One, the Mercer family, and to the Koch brothers. So basically they did this secretly because the whole point of Breitbart is to seem anti-establishment, which is very important, which this ties into this whole Cambridge Analytica thing. Obviously they're not. They're just really not anti-establishment. Now Steve Bannon actually oversaw, even though Alexander Nix was technically the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, having worked with SCL for many years, he actually oversaw the campaign. He really hyped up the sort of rhetoric that they were pushing out. Now, how did this work? This wasn't just like a sort of normal advertising campaign. They acquired data and they stole data, huge swathes of data. At one point they boasted that they had sort of like 5,000 data points for every single adult, person of voting age in America. Now, can you imagine if you know 5,000 things about a person, how much easier it would be to manipulate them rather than knowing nothing about them? A really great example, if I need to scare you and I know that you're afraid of spiders, I'm going to use spiders. I know that's really glib, but if you've got 5,000 data points connected with all the other surveillance that we will get into later, it is surprising what you can do. Andy Wigmore, who was the head of the campaign for Leave.eu, who also used Cambridge Analytica, said that the most potent weapon that we have in our arsenal is a like on Facebook, because we know something about you, and then we can tie this to other things, and there'll be like-minded people around you who all think the same thing, and we can apply our algorithm to it, and the computer never stops watching you, and it never stops learning. And at that point he was told, wow, man, that's really creepy. And he says, well, that's why I'm not on Facebook. Now, they stole all your data. They looked at the things that you liked. They looked at the things that you didn't like. And they looked at the things that made you angry, because people are aware that huge amounts of the world are very disgruntled. And what they did was they took this data and they fed it into an algorithm. And they made a profile of you. They bombarded you with sock puppet accounts, fake profiles who would start up conversations and lead you in a certain direction. And they would point you to certain stories, certain memes, certain tropes, certain pages that all supported things that they knew would make you angry. And further to that, they micro-targeted you, which would mean that they actually made adverts and posts and conversations specifically for you. Specifically for you. The other thing that they were doing was they were basically mapping your personality and seeing how what would be an effective campaign slogan. And they were doing this as early as 2014, when Cambridge Analytica, their candidate was going to be Ted Cruz. You remember Ted Cruz was the forerunner right up until the point that Donald Trump took over. Now in 2014, they'd already established they were going to use several phrases. They were going to use drain the swamp, build the wall, lock her up, and the concept of the deep state. All of those 4 slogans were decided by Cambridge Analytica in 2014, before Donald Trump was even the candidate. What happened, why Donald Trump became the candidate, is because but Robert Mercer and Steve Bannon decided that he would be the very best person to get their message across. Now, the DOJ illegally, and this was shown in the WikiLeaks dump, thought that Donald Trump would be an easy candidate to beat. So they illegally put adverts for him in conservative newspapers and GOP newspapers to promote him as a candidate. And this backfired because Robert Mercer looked at it and went, he actually plays quite well on telly, this Donald Trump guy, doesn't he? This is like millions and millions of pounds worth of free publicity. Sod this, we'll just use him because the candidate's not important. It's the message that's important. We're selling it through Cambridge Analytica, so it really doesn't matter. Now, how did they get all these slogans and stuff like that? Through quizzes. So they already had this idea of draining the swamp, building a wall, lock her up, this concept of the deep state, this idea that they were going to sell an anti-establishment person. And frankly, as well, Donald Trump was a bit better to sell that image than Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz stepped aside. Now, initially, Ted Cruz had all the sort of people that were connected to Donald Trump, and they all shifted, basically, because they were Heritage Foundation. Now, Donald Trump actually had to do an audition in front of the Heritage Foundation before they allowed him to be the candidate. but we will come on to that later, because I appreciate that I'm bipping around all over the place. So, for example, someone was saying to me the other day, I don't buy any of this Cambridge Analytica stuff. There's no way that you could manipulate me into believing something, or there's no way that you could change my behaviour. And I started off by saying, well, look at their proven track record. They've won elections in Nigeria and Kenya, and they've done work in Italy, and they've got Modi in India, and they got Bolsonaro in Brazil, and they're pushing all these other populist candidates around Europe. I don't care about that. It doesn't matter. I said, okay, fair enough. But their website, they were behind the Orange Revolution in the Ukraine. They proudly boast about that on their now defunct website. But if you go on the Wayback Machine, you can find all of this, because so they used to boast about it. They bragged about being involved in the campaign for the Leave campaign, until basically they pointed out that this is desperately illegal, and so they pretended that they didn't. Now, what they did was the way that they weren't able to be investigated for this was because they stored all the information in a company in America called Aggregate IQ. In Canada called Aggregate IQ, which is out of the jurisdiction of any British investigation. So there's no evidence to investigate other than the stuff that they actually admitted in public. So this guy was saying to me, I can't be persuaded by that. So I went on his wall and I noticed that basically he'd spread a load of Turning Point USA and Turning Point UK memes. You've seen them. This is your country on socialism. This is why it's good for Brexit, blah, 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 blah. I says, you do know that Turning Point is financed by the Koch brothers? He says, well, no, and he didn't believe it, and he stormed off. I said, well, there you go. That's how you've been tricked into it. You spread that, which is Koch Industries propaganda, because it appealed to you. They were able to appeal to you because they knew what got you angry. They knew what got you angry because they've been spying on you and manipulating your feelings with lies for months, if not years. And therefore, you're spreading Koch industry propaganda. And this is where the concept of the creation of the alt-right and alternative right-wing media comes into it. All of a sudden, we had a swathe of things like Daily Caller and Rumour Report, and Drudge Report went very right-wing, and InfoWars went very right-wing, and Red Ice Radio went very right-wing, and all of a sudden Richard Spencer's come into the fray, and Ben Shapiro's being very, very right-wing, and Breitbart's really, really popular, and all of this. And we've got this entire sort of node of places where we're spreading similar stories, which is anti-Muslim rhetoric. And if we remember the very words of Cambridge Analytica, the whole point is to get you angry by leveraging a false enemy, making something that doesn't really exist, or highlighting and majorly exacerbating something that does exist and playing on your already existing fears. And what they did was they used terrorism and the concept of refugees in Europe, refugees in South America, and Islamic terrorism all over the place. They used a series of videos that were produced by a company called Gatestone Media, which is connected to the Gatestone Institute. The Gatestone Institute is financed by Nina Rosenwald, who is the heir to the Sears fortune. And it is also connected to the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers also finance this as well. So again, we're seeing the same sort of people. And they produce all these videos where you see Germany being taken over by Sharia law, or France being taken over by Sharia law. And these were aimed at swing states in America and the targets of these Cambridge Analytica campaigns. The other thing is all these videos that were produced by Gatestone Media were all fed by, Rebel Media, Turning Point USA, the Daily Caller, WND, and Project Veritas, and the rest. So let's just go through all of these, right? Okay. Breitbart is financed by the Koch brothers and the Mercer family. The Daily Caller is financed by the Koch brothers. WND is financed by the Koch brothers. Turning Point USA is financed by the Koch brothers and the DeVos family. Rebel Media is financed by the Rosenwalds and the Mercers. Red Ice Radio is financed by the Revolutionary family. The Revolutionary family are the people, the actual white supremacists who came up with the original America First party. Project Veritas is financed by the Koch brothers. In fact, Project Veritas was trained by Eric Prince of Blackwater with the help of MI5 spies. But yeah, another connection to the elites. The Rubin Report is financed by George Mason University, which is conduit for the Koch brothers. The Washington Free Beacon is financed by the Koch brothers. PragerU is financed by the Wilkes brothers, who own Frac Tech, and by Dennis Prager, who is a member of the Heritage Foundation. Gatestone Media is financed by Nina Rosenwald. So Laura Loomer, Lawrence Southern, Tommy Robinson, all those people who work for Rebel Media, they're all financed by the Koch brothers, the Rosenwalds. The MEF, which is the Middle East Forum, which is a think tank that promotes hard-right, pro-Israeli thought. Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Glenn Beck, they're all financed by the Koch brothers. Richard Spence is financed by the NPI and the Charles Martel Society, which is William Regnery II. So again, all of these people who are spreading this very same message that is integral to these campaigns, this idea of basically spreading fear and by getting inside your head and spreading facts or, fake news, whilst also setting up the premise of fake news to dismiss anybody that goes, hang on, this is nonsense, you're lying here, this is completely ridiculous. So it's the same people putting in money to the same institutes or to all these institutes, to get them to talk about specific things. I mean, it even goes so far as Rush Limbaugh, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham and Glenn Beck have all taken money to talk about certain, hype up certain stories that benefit Koch Industries and keep other stories out of their media, or to poo-poo them as false.
So how do you know that Red Ice is funded by somebody? How did you figure that out?
There was a conference or something that was put on, and basically they announced on their website that it was financed by the Regneries. It's as straightforward as that. And this is the point. People don't look into this. Like, the Wilkes brothers financed Ben Shapiro. They're not shy about this. You just got to do a bit of digging and look at it. Mostly it's through conduits like the George Mason University or the TPSK or whatever. But Turning Point is known to be a mouthpiece for Koch Industries. So, Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens, despite protesting to be fiercely independent, they're shields for big business.
I think what we can say, or what I would say, is that they are being influenced by these groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And
to go in a certain direction.
Yeah, and I think a huge amount of people were. And some of it was because basically they were getting financing, and some of it was because that was the way that the tide was turning. There was a distinct list to the right. That's why so many within the conspiracy world, or whatever you want to call it, genuinely think that Donald Trump is actually a decent person because they bought into the trickery. That's why a lot of people genuinely think that leaving the EU is going to be a good idea, because they bought into the trickery. Now, let's just examine. So what did they say? What are they talking about with the EU? Right? Okay, the reason we wanted to leave is to take back control. Take back control, which is Dominic Cummings. He came up with that phrase. Now, if he didn't get that from Cambridge Analytica, our buyer had to eat it, because it basically speaks to that paranoia that they were trying to push forward. So the main reasons that people will put forward that they want to leave the EU were, one, to take back control of our laws, because it was put around there that we're basically under EU law. It was even put about there that the EU is under Napoleonic law, and when the Lisbon Treaty kicks in, then we will be under Napoleonic law as well. And what Napoleonic law means is that basically you're guilty until proven innocent, whereas in England, supposedly we have habeas corpus, which means that you're innocent until proven guilty. Now, the only problem with this is it's rubbish. That's not true at all. In fact, you can disprove it by looking at the European Court of Human Rights. The thing that the UK Tory government keeps trying to get rid of. The fourth principle in that is that you're innocent until proven guilty. You can go to every single respective country's code of practice for law and type in innocent until proven guilty in every single one. Nowhere in Europe are you not allowed to be tried before a jury and to be told what your charge is. It was a lie that was invented in 1997 by the Referendum Party, which, by the way, was started by a goldsmith. Euroscepticism was started by the Goldsmith family, but people don't want to talk about that. because it's uncomfortable. But anyway, I digress. So that's not true, this whole concept of laws. And if you look at it, actually, we do have control of our laws. There are 72 laws that have been imposed by the EU onto the UK, and every single one of them is beneficial to workers or to normal human beings. It's all to do with trade. And it's the working time objective. I forget what it was. Yeah, working time objective basically means that you're allowed breaks and you're allowed a lunch hour and that you have to be paid a minimum wage. It's the Human Rights Act, and it's certain food standards, like you're not allowed to have carcinogens in jam. There's only 72. Every single one of them is beneficial to the UK. So all this concept of 80% of our laws come from the EU, or we're under the tyrannical, unelected EU, just isn't true. I used to think it was true. I looked into it. None of it's true. We've been arguing with someone saying there's nonsense going around that basically will be forced into the euro by 2020 because of the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty came into effect in 2009, and it specifically says in there that we're not allowed to join the euro unless we ask to join it. You can't be forced into it. There's so much nonsense. Sovereignty, that was another thing. Aside from the fact that nobody actually knows what that means, it transpires that we do have sovereignty. One of the first points was looked into was for the government to create a white paper and figure out whether we had it. And it said, yeah, we have sovereignty. We've always had sovereignty. That was an integral part of the way that we joined into the EU. It just doesn't always look like that. Control of our borders. Well, it transpires that under EU law, that basically anyone that comes into the UK has to be broken down into 3 categories: under 3 months, 3 months and over, and permanent. Under 3 months is a holiday, 3 months and over is education or some sort of long-term contract, permanent is permanent residency. On every single one of those accounts, you have to show that you have means to support yourself, somewhere to stay and or live, and means to get yourself home. And if you cannot provide that, then they don't let you in the country. And if you are shown to have lied, after 3 months, you can be deported. Now, this happens in every single country in the EU, except for the UK, where Tony Blair in 1998 decided, well, we're just going to not do that. We could reinstate that law at any time. The fisheries. For some reason, everyone's really bent out of shape about the fisheries. No one gave a shit about the fisheries for all this time, but now all of a sudden, it shows how the EU are destroying us. Well, that's not true either. It transpires that the UK is responsible for its own fishing rights, and what it does is it's the only country again in the EU that has this special law that says you can sell your fishing plots to other countries. Now, this is exacerbated by the fact that a quarter of the fishing industry in the UK is owned by 3 people. So there's a huge monopoly that's owned by big business. And rather than sell it to English fishermen, they undercut them and sell it to foreign fishermen who are prepared to generate a larger profit for them. Furthermore, the 3-time elected, so this concept of unelected MPs is nonsense as well. Nigel Farage, who is an MEP, he has had 4 occasions where he could have voted in the EU to repeal that so that the UK government couldn't do that anymore and were forced to give their plots of fisheries back to the English fishermen. And he didn't bother because he's a grifter. Furthermore, what's her name? I can't remember her name. Alexandra Phillips, I think is her name, MEP for the Brexit Party. The Brexit Party that has mysterious backers, one of them being Aaron Banks. Well, she's Cambridge Analytica. She worked for Cambridge Analytica, which means she's connected to the intelligence agencies and she's more connected to this larger cabal. So why are they telling you all these lies? Well, if you look at the people that actually invested, for example, let's look at Brexit first. The people that invested in Brexit, why would they tell you all these lies? Why is it they want to get the England out of the EU? Why are they using these things that... I get it. People are disgruntled by these issues. Some of these issues are real, but they're lying to you about the solutions. Furthermore, there's a problem with the Irish problem. You're going to have a hard border there, and you can't do that without knackering up the Good Friday Agreement. And basically, because we stole Northern Ireland many, many years ago and we refused to give it back, that's a problem that they knew existed right from the start, and they've never once offered a solution to it. Never once offered a solution that would be satisfactory to either Brexiteers or Remainers on that particular thing. So what's the deal behind this? Well, they must have known right from the start that what they were offering was ridiculous. It was impossible. They always wanted to crash out on no deal. Why? Because the financiers The 8 main financiers of the Brexit campaign are worth something like 13 billion, and they put in 14 million or something like that into the campaign. It's ridiculous. Crispin Odey is one of them. And what did he do? The first thing he did when it was discovered that we were going to leave the EU, he made £220 million on the pound tanking. There are all of these 8 backers: Lord Bamford, Lord Edwinstowe, Aaron Banks, I forget the other names, the guy that I've just mentioned, Crispin Odey. They've all put options on the pound, which means that if the pound loses its value, if we crash out with no deal, they stand to make, they've put on put options of over £8 billion. He stands to personally make £13 billion if we crash out in a detrimental way. These are the people that financed the Leave campaign. So that must have been their intention right from the start.
So let me ask you a couple of questions here. Because of the way this has been presented throughout the media, even the alternative media, it sounds to me like your research is saying that the EU, being this evil entity that is just looking to impose oppression on the sovereign states within Europe, is not a true narrative.
No, it's not strictly true. No, and the way that it's been sold to us as is a provable lie, as part of a propaganda campaign, in order to get people to rally behind crashing out on a no deal, which was the intention of the Cambridge Analytica campaign, which is connected to British intelligence and all these pound tanking hedge fund billionaires that are going to make money from disaster capitalism. That's really what it's all about. Is that they want to make money. The other reason is that basically, if we remain in the EU past 2020, certain offshore banking rules come into place, which means that you're not allowed to hide your money in the Cayman Islands anymore, being a member of the EU. So that will benefit the ultra wealthy. This is the point. Now, do I think the EU is brilliant? No. Do I think that it's bureaucratic, arrogant, overstuffed, badly needs reforming? Yes. Do I think it's financially beneficial for the UK to remain in the EU? Yes. Every single metric has shown, in fact, the government's own figures showed that we put in £137 million a week and we get back £2.6 billion in overall compensation for this, because the trade that is generated by this adds to 4% of our GDP. I've seen it as high as 10%, but that was the 2016, our own government's own figures. The membership of the EU contributes to 4% of our gross national product, which constitutes 2.6 billion a week benefit. Everything that I was told that I believed turned out to be a lie. The stuff about the laws, the stuff about sovereignty, the stuff about the encroaching EU army, it's not a thing. The stuff about all this, and it's nonsense. And furthermore, what I've discovered is that when we crash out without a deal, which, by the way, is if we go to WTO rules, what we're doing there, do you know what economic sanctions is? Economic sanctions is a warfare tactic where we stop a nation from trading with other people. Well, we're ripping up hundreds and hundreds of trade deals so that immediately we'll be in a position of self-imposed economic sanctions. That's not hyperbole. That's not Project Fear. That's just a practical, tangible fact of what that particular route actually is going to do to us. And it's silly. But furthermore, what I've discovered is that the only sort of things that are being offered afterwards are trade deals with America and trade deals with certain elements of Australia. The problem with that is essentially we become America's poodle. So this concept of taking back control and being upset about 72 trade laws, well, if we start trading with America, we're going to have to go to American food and medical standards, which I don't mean to be offensive, but they're not to as high a standard as in the EU. And that will just be part of the trade deal. That's the point. Now, here's where it starts getting very interesting. Who are these trade deals being pushed by? They're being pushed by the IEA and the IFT, the Independent Economic, the Institute of Economic Affairs and the Institute for Free Trade. These are think tanks in the UK that are connected to free trade and small government. We'll come on to what that means in a minute. They are basically financed by this think tank in America called the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is this hugely influential think tank that was started by the Coors brothers, and the whole point of it is to lobby, but to lobby from a specific businessly minded right-wing Christian perspective. And a very sort of hardline Christian perspective, and their influence is incredible. And I've got a list here. It's a little indulgent, but if you just indulge me on this, Mike, this will give you a sort of an overview and an explanation of where this all ties together, right? So Cambridge Analytica, which we've just talked about, is the thing that was there to get you angry, the weapons grade technology, the weapon of MI5. It's financed by the Mercers, who are Heritage Foundation, and Steve Bannon, who's a member of the Heritage Foundation and the CNP. And this was done with the help of British intelligence. The Thatcher government, Margaret Thatcher, based its policies entirely on the Heritage Foundation's recommendations to privatise British industry, so British Petroleum, British Aerospace, Cable and Wireless, Amersham International, National Freight, Brit Oil, Associated British Ports, Enterprise Oil, Jaguar, British Telecoms, British Shipbuilders, British Gas, British Airways, Rolls-Royce, BAA, British Steel, British Water and British Electricity were all privatised in the UK at the request of the Heritage Foundation. The Reagan doctrine and the Reagan administration were based on recommendations from the Heritage Foundation. They have a manual that they give out to the people that they support called the Mandate for Leadership. Now, when Reagan went in, 67% of the policies that were recommended in this Mandate for Leadership were put into action directly by the Reagan administration. Obamacare was a policy that initially came from the Heritage Foundation. The Clinton policy of removing welfare from huge swathes of people in the USA, which was called PRWORA, was a Heritage Foundation policy. Operation Desert Storm was Heritage Foundation policy. The IEA, who were desperately trying to privatise the NHS and has arch Brexiteers David Davis, Boris Johnson, Daniel Hannan, Liam Fox, Michael Gove under its wing, is financed and associated with the Heritage Foundation. Turning Point UK, which is connected to Jacob Rees-Mogg and wants to privatise the NHS and arrange for the UK to reduce its food standards to the FDA, is also connected to the Heritage Foundation. Turning Point USA, who made a star of Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk, are financed by the Koch brothers, who are Heritage Foundation, and by Betsy DeVos, who is Heritage Foundation. William Regenery, who financed Richard Spencer and whose far-right pro-Nazi grandfather came up with the phrase America First, is also connected to the Heritage Foundation. He also published a series of books by Donald Trump and was involved in a telephone campaign and internet campaign to try and get him elected. Dinesh D'Souza is also a Heritage Foundation member. Reverend Jerry Falwell was a Heritage Foundation member, and his political party, the Moral Majority, was also financed by the Heritage Foundation and created by them. The Bruges Society, who's a pro-Brexit group, is financed by the Heritage Foundation. The Mont Pelerin Society, who's a pro-Brexit group, is financed by the Heritage Foundation. ALEC, they're basically a company that helps facilitate things for business, and they help roll back environmental protections and for the Dakota pipeline that we were really bothered about up until Trump told us not to be bothered about. They're Koch Industries, so that's Heritage Foundation. Donald Trump actually had to audition before the Heritage Foundation, later the CNP, before they would back him for candidate. The Heritage Foundation are that powerful that in 2007, when Rudolph Giuliani said that he was standing, the Heritage Foundation said that they would split the Republican Party by putting their own candidate forward if he didn't back off, because he wasn't anti-abortion enough for them. So Rudolph Giuliani stood down. Who did they get in? They got they got McCain, and the reason that McCain was allowed to run was because Sarah Palin was his running mate. Sarah Palin is CNP, which is the more secretive version of the Heritage Foundation. The tax cut that Trump introduced was Heritage Foundation policy. Rollbacks on workers' rights and LGBT protections are all Heritage Foundation policy. The attempted coup in Venezuela was part of the Heritage Foundation's policy to install a USA-friendly ruler who would give his OPEC vote to the USA, thus allowing the USA to have control of world oil prices. Bolsonaro was elected in Brazil with the help from the Cambridge Analytica and then changed the country country's oil policy to favour the USA. This was a Heritage Foundation policy. The Atlas network of pro-USA think tanks designed to interfere with South American politics is a Heritage Foundation offshoot. Trump has installed over 60 members of the Heritage Foundation in his administration, and that just means in the back office. That's not these ones that I'm just about to mention. Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Betsy DeVos, Jeff Sessions, Scott Pruitt, Mick Mulvaney, Rick Perry, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and Mike Pence are all Heritage Foundation and were all proposed for their respective positions by the Heritage Foundation. Steve Bannon, Mike Pence and Kellyanne Conway are members of the CNP, which is a more exclusive level of the Heritage Foundation, as is Rebecca and Robert Mercer. And Ron Paul, actually. Breitbart was set up with money from the Koch brothers and the Mercers and run by Steve Bannon, all of which are Heritage Foundation and CNP. AFP, Americans for Prosperity, they founded the Tea Party movement. They were founded by the Heritage Foundation. The Mercers and the Koch brothers also financed James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. Dave Rubin is financed by the Koch brothers, Heritage Foundation. Rush Limbaugh, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham are financed by the Koch brothers, which is Heritage Foundation, to keep certain stories down and to hype others on their respective shows. The Daily Caller is financed by the Koch brothers, which are Heritage Foundation. Rebel Media is financed by the Mercers, the Koch brothers, the MEF, and Betsy DeVos. Three of those are Heritage Foundation. Gatestone Media is financed by the Koch brothers, and the Rosenwalds. Koch brothers are Heritage Foundation. Glenn Beck was financed by the Koch brothers, Heritage Foundation. Ben Shapiro is financed by the Wilkes brothers, who are Heritage Foundation. And PragerU is financed by the Wilkes brothers, Heritage Foundation, and Dennis Prager. Now, this is where it gets weird. The Heritage Foundation was founded with money from the Coors brothers and set up by a gentleman called Edward Forner and Paul Weyrich. Paul Weyrich was thought not to be a good person to do this because he was friends with a well-known Nazi collaborator called Laszlo Pastor. But as all the Heritage Foundation members are basically connected to the World Anti-Communist League, which is a euphemism for very, very pro-Nazi, that was the least of their troubles. But they needed some more money, so they got it from the Unification Church of Sun Myung Moon. The Unification Church was started by three people: Sun Myung Moon, who suddenly started to believe that he was Jesus, a CIA operative and Japanese fascist called Sasakawa, and a CIA operative and Japanese fascist called Kodama, who were basically they were brutal murderers of fascists that were taken under the wing of the CIA after the Second World War and became operatives for them. So these three people, along with the KCIA, which was the South American Intelligence Agency, long known to have been financed by the CIA, they decided that they would stump up a huge amount of cash via the newly formed Unification Church, which many believe to be an MK Ultra offshoot and an MK Ultra mind control cult. They financed the Heritage Foundation. Seeing as the Unification Church was founded by two CIA members and via the CIA directly through the KCIA, the Unification Church is CIA. The Unification Church funds the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation is CIA. So that's my problem with all of this, with this concept of Trump being anti-establishment. He can't be, because he's backed by the CIA. The concept that Brexit is anti-establishment. It can't be, because it's backed by MI5. It uses a weapon of MI5. And that is my only position on it. Everything else, you have to go, right, okay, well, that's the starting position. I didn't think that 3 years ago. I thought the opposite. I thought that Brexit was an anti-establishment vote, and I thought that voting for Trump was an anti-establishment vote. Something always didn't sit right about it. But the second that I found out that MI5 have used a weapon for the Brexit vote, and that this same weapon is being used to help elect Trump, I started digging. And then you find out the connections to the different think tanks, and then you find out the connections to big business and Koch Industries. And I'll explain what the whole point of it is now. And this is where people are getting sort of a bit sort of messed up on it, because for years and years and years, we've been open to the possibility that there is a centralization of power that's going on in the EU and various other places by the utilization of unions, turning it into progressively into a smaller and smaller centralized government. We've heard about that, the Australasian Union, the American Union, the European Union, and this was the way that they were going to centralize power. Here's the thing. If I know about that, and you know about that, then the people who were planning that, they know we know that. So it's entirely plausible that they've changed tactics. Now, what I am seeing is that that's entirely what they're doing. And rather than get 28 countries together in the EU, for example, and have one ruler over all of those, you're going to have Salvini in Italy. You're going to have Wilders in Germany, in Holland. You're going to have Waddell in Germany. You're going to have Farage or Johnson in England. You're going to have Le Pen in France. You have Bolsonaro in Brazil. You're going to have Modi in India. You're going to have, I forget who we put in Kenya and Nigeria. And we're trying in Venezuela. And we've already done things in all these different places all over the world. And so what it is essentially, if you notice all these candidates who all use Cambridge Analytica, all use Breitbart and InfoWars and this node of alternative media, all spread the same stories, all have the same policies, all financed by the same people. It's New World Order by piecemeal. Rather than doing it in a union, what we're doing is we're promoting this concept of nationalist popularism. And you know how I know it's rubbish? Because none of these candidates that promote this nationalism ever talk about anything that's positive about their countries. They don't actually talk about nationalism. They talk about jingoism. And it's a very, very distinctive difference. Now, jingoism isn't talking about what makes England great. It's not Constable and cricket and Wimbledon and Shakespeare. No, what it is, dear God, look at those brown people. All of these candidates don't promote positivity, nationalism, popularism. What they do is they promote fear. They talk about someone coming and taking it away from you. And they're all presenting themselves as anti-establishment. And they're all connected to these hedge fund billionaires and big business capitalists, bankers, who basically exist to make money out of chaos. And that's the entire point of it. And it's crazy, man. And it's crazy. And then to say, if you want to go even further, if you look at the CNP, which is the think tank behind the Heritage Foundation, the CNP was started by Tim LaHaye and various other people from the Heritage Foundation. Paul Weyrich is involved. And now, like the mafia, you're not allowed to even acknowledge that the CNP exists. But the CNP has members like Pence and Kellyanne Conway. All of them are in very, very high positions. It's actually incredibly worrying that a think tank that is so secretive is so prevalent in US politics. Now, what they are into hardcore Old Testament. The other thing is that the Heritage Foundation and the CNP, they're essentially seeded from Fred Koch, who's the Koch brothers' dad, and Fred Trump and the Coors brothers' father, who were all members of the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society is, again, this hardcore, far-right Christian society, which actually produced the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which is where Alex Jones got his start. Now, they're the people that basically see communists, a communist conspiracy anywhere. Everywhere that you go, it's communist. It's communist, 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 communist. Is it any coincidence that that's what we're getting now at the minute? This concept of socialism, communism, creeping communism, res under the bed, all of it nonsense. All of it basically relying on you not actually checking the source. And I'll give you a really good example, and a lot of people are going to go flipping mad for this one, right? But it's true, so I'm sorry. George Soros, there's an idea that George Soros is behind the refugee campaign in America and then also in Mexico and everywhere, apparently, because, you know, he's everywhere all at once. And the concept is that basically he was transporting these refugees to various places to create a crisis in Europe. And I'm sure everybody's seen this. Problem is, it's not true, right? It's not even remotely true. How do I know it's not true? Because, you know, the people who invented the lie, they admitted it. Do you know who invented the lie? Mossad. Right. This is where it gets good. Vincent Chengui, who's a board member of Cambridge Analytica, who's also a board member of Black Cube, and it came out through a series of released emails in a court case in a dispute over pay that essentially Black Cube is an offshoot of Cambridge Analytica that operates in Israel. uses exactly the same tactics, smear campaigns, honey traps, essentially basically injecting false material into the internet to create fear and anger. And please remind me that I want to come on to SMISC and stuff like that, which is why I first got onto this in a second. What happened was Viktor Orban is the person, he's the dictator of Hungary. And don't get it messed up, he's an absolute dictator. They've got a total horrific autocracy going on there where everything is corruptly run through the government and they take kickbacks from everything. And if you're not in the government's pocket, you're not going to succeed in business there, for example. Viktor Orban wanted to get elected. He's been mates with Benjamin Netanyahu for years, absolutely years. Now, so what they did was he went to Bibi, as he calls him, and he says, "Oh, Bibi, old mucker, how can I get elected?" And Netanyahu said, "Well, you know, when I got elected, what I did was I used a smear campaign against my opponent. I made up a load of lies and put it out that he wanted to give Jerusalem back to the Palestinians. And this obviously caused a huge amount of fear and anger, and Netanyahu went from a position of losing to a huge advantage almost overnight, using surprisingly similar tactics years ago." Anyway, the people that instigated this was his own lawyers, Finkelstein and Birnbaum. And they says, "Yeah, we can do that for you. In fact, we've got the perfect target," right? Okay. George Soros. He's not very well liked by the Brexit crowd. He's not very well liked by people in America because he's seen as left-wing. And this was a bit of a problem in Hungary, right? And I'll tell you for why. One, because George Soros had paid for Viktor Orban's education. And two, George Soros was incredibly popular in Hungary because basically he's massively anti-communist. And he was putting loads of money into rebuilding generating the country. He was really well liked. So this is, well, what we can do is we can use Black Cube. Black Cube is a Mossad version of Cambridge Analytica. It's under export control to the IDF. Right? So it can't be used without the say-so of the Israeli government in exactly the same way that Cambridge Analytica can't be used without the say-so of the British government. And again, this is all being directed by think tanks from America who want to privatise industry in the UK and take over oil prices. Now, we'll come to why it's important for Israel in a second. So they used Black Cube and basically started putting out all this hype about George Soros being behind the refugee crisis. To further exacerbate this, Viktor Orban got a whole swathe of coaches, like armies and armies of coaches. He stopped trains that were not supposed to stop in Hungary, took refugees off them. He also got refugees from outside of Hungary and then drove them and dropped them off in places like Spain, France and Germany, in places where they weren't supposed to be, to cause the maximum amount of chaos. So Viktor Orban was actually doing the thing that he was accusing George Soros of doing. And it was admitted by Finkelstein and Birnbaum that all of the stories about him being responsible for the EU migration were lies. They were Mossad propaganda designed specifically to get Viktor Orban elected. Why are Israel bothered about this? Why are America trying to break up the EU? It's very simple, because basically they've got China and Russia to worry about. The EU is a very powerful economic rival, and it would be much better if it was broken up. Why are Israel involved? Well, Israel are financing the Azov battalion at the minute. You know, the people that are desperately trying to fight Putin in the Ukraine. Why? Because there's a fight going on in the Ukraine and Syria. This is why Russia were fighting a proxy war against our proxy war in Syria. Do you know what it's down to? Oil pipelines. There's an oil pipeline that's being built through the Ukraine, an oil pipeline that's being built through Syria. And Israel, the EU, America and Russia are all fighting over both of them to see who gets control over them. It's just really down to that. And why is that beneficial? Because the Heritage Foundation is all these oil people. It's Koch Industries. And then the hedge fund managers who are going to make money off the chaos off the back of this. So that's what it's all about.
What it is, it's manipulation. It's a strategy that's put in place in order to manipulate the minds of the masses and steer them in a specific direction. And time is pretty much on their side, I would say, right? I mean,
yep.
and when we talk about the Heritage Foundation and all of this, we're really talking about a secret society. It all rolls up under the Committee of 300, based upon my research. This polarization that people are experiencing, based upon your work, you're saying that polarization of society and the cultures, it's fabricated.
It's been seeded. And it played. Now, let me explain, because yes, you're dead right there. It's been seeded, and what they've done is they've played on people's fears of differences, and then they've taken that to the nth degree.
Okay, I just want to make sure we clarify it, because even the Soros piece of it, right?
Yeah, people are going to go mad about that, and I said that, but the thing is, now here's the thing, right, again, let me just quantify that. Do I think George Soros is a good guy? No. Do I think he's a CIA asset that was used to overthrow Yugoslavia? Yep. Why is he not answering any of this hype against him? Because he's playing the heel. He's in on this too. George Soros is a member of the Atlas, not in Heritage, but he's connected to the Atlas Network. The Atlas Network is this collection of think tanks in South America that is connected to oil companies and banking cartels and stuff like that. And he's he's aided, right? He's financed through US aid, which is again another CIA conduit. So again, although it's for the benefit of these oil conglomerates, it's also for American foreign policy. George Soros is in the Atlas Group, which means that he benefits from Bolsonaro being in. He benefits from the overthrow of Venezuela and Argentina, which they're also trying to do. But he's playing the heel in regards to things. It's a wrestling thing. He's playing the villain in this, so that everyone just focuses on him and doesn't look at the facts. Now, the immutable facts are these connections to the Heritage Foundation, the connections to the CIA, the connections to Cambridge Analytica, and the connections to MI5. Do you know that two things can exist at the same time? You know, George Soros can be a bad guy, but some things about him could be not true. And also there can be other bad guys that you didn't notice because you were focusing on that bad guy. Now, why did I first get into this? Because it was so... You've heard of JTRIG? I'm sure I've talked on your program before about JTRIG. JTRIG's a GCHQ program, which basically it puts false prophets and false information, red herrings, into the milieu of the internet in order to disrupt people. Like the one thing that it's admitted to be doing is against terrorist organizations, and it was used in Argentina to try and get people to be pro-British, and it worked when the Falkland Islands came under scrutiny again. So it's very, very effective at what it does. But it can be used against any combatant or anybody that's considered an enemy of the state. Now, this has got incredible powers. It can just, create stories. It can plant stuff on your computer. It can shut stories down. It can destroy websites. It can, but the basic gist of it is to spread false information around the internet. And it's like, that's remarkably similar to what Cambridge Analytica are doing. And then the connection to MI5, the connection to GCHQ, you go, well, I wonder if this is part of the same thing. And at the same time, you've got loads of operations going on with the Pentagon. One of them was called SMISC. Now, SMISC, strategic manipulation in social communication. The whole point of that is to try and manipulate people's emotions online. Facebook had got caught doing this a few years ago. Again, David Petraeus admitted to it. It was CIA-run programs. The whole point was to try and manipulate your emotions on Facebook, to try and get you angry or to try and get you sad. And in order to do this, they used sock puppet accounts, fake bots and things like that who would have conversations with you and rile you up. That's incredibly similar to what Cambridge Analytica was doing. In fact, it's exactly what Cambridge Analytica were doing. Then you find out about things like, there was a report that came out in 2014 that showed that at certain times on Reddit and other forums, the source or the IP address of the most popular sort of posters seemed to uniformly come from one place, and that was Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. Now, some people might recognize Eglin Air Force Base as being the Air Force Base where Operation Northwoods was supposed to be launched out of. Now, it's also a hub for social media manipulation tactics and internet manipulation programs. And what they were doing was they were basically running a program on this on Reddit at the time to see how they could direct and influence online chat. Now, again, going back to the concept of Cambridge Analytica and this sort of huge anger that people are feeling, the pro-Trump mood, the sort of different stories and stuff like that, where did a lot of it spread? Reddit. Now, here's some of the stories, okay? And again, because I appreciate that some people are going to go, I don't buy into this because this jives totally with what I've been told before. And fine, go read my blog, look at the sources. Like, I wouldn't say this if I didn't think I could back it up. I have no say in the outcome of elections and I have no agenda. So it's just some stuff. If you don't agree with it, just ignore it, okay? If you want proof, just read it and I'll back it up. It's horrible, but I have too much respect to people to lie to them. And so, you know, I didn't want to find this crap out, but I did. And I'm not going to keep quiet and I'm not going to lie about it. If I've found something out, I'm going to tell people about it. These stories were admitted by Cambridge Analytica employees as being stories that were specifically seeded into the Trump campaign to go against Hillary Clinton. Did you see that one that's been floating around recently that Hillary Clinton personally provided weapons to ISIS? That was a Cambridge Analytica admitted false campaign. Did you see that story that was very popular for a time about a 13-year-old girl being raped in Sweden and her rapist only got 40 weeks community service? That was a false, fake Cambridge Analytica story. In fact, the whole concept of the rape gangs in Sweden was seeded by Cambridge Analytica via those media nodes, all owned by the same billionaires and elitists that ran the campaign. Do you remember that story that Germany had acquiesced to allowing child brides because of the influx of huge amounts of refugees? That wasn't true. That was a fake story that was created by Cambridge Analytica in order to get people really, really angry. Can you remember when it was being spoken about that Hillary Clinton was a cannibal and that she had Kuru disease? Well, that turns out that was a Cambridge Analytica invented story specifically put out there in order to make people angry. Can you remember when it was said that Hillary Clinton had had a stroke? I saw that on InfoWars. That turned out to be an admitted Cambridge Analytica false story that was put out there to make people angry. Can you remember when it was said that Donald Trump was being supported by the Pope? That was an admitted false story that was put out there to actually not make people angry, to be a pro-Donald Trump story. So this is it. This is all admitted. And that's really the sort of gist of it, to be quite honest. And so I know it jives against what a lot of people have sort of been thinking for a long time, but I can back it all up.
I'm sure you can, Neil. I will tell you, though, that, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, but there are going to be people in our community that are going to lose their shit over this.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Like, you know, and the important thing to understand about any sort of propaganda as well is that basically, which is what Cambridge Analytica is, it's a propaganda machine, it's a psychological warfare operation. It's got to have an element of truth in it. Otherwise, there's got to have an element of truth. People knew that Hillary Clinton was terrible. And that's how they played on that. That's why they got that lock her up chant. People knew that they felt disgruntled and that the elites were tricking them. That's why they used the deep state thing. But it's a trick. Now, here's the thing. I, again, believed all this sort of stuff as well until I found this out. But you know, when you're faced with new facts that contradict what you've thought before, you check them. And you know, if they're right, you have to incorporate that into your worldview.
Exactly.
Like, it's like with Charles Manson, like, okay, I used to think he was a mind control victim, right up to the point where I was looking at it and stuff like that, and I was like, no, I don't think he's a mind control victim. I think that basically the story, the whole story, is a concoction to hide a drug deal, as we've talked about before. But I had to reposition my thinking on that. And again, you know, when you have Mossad admitting that these stories about George Soros, I made that up. They admitted it. Look it up. Finkelstein and Birnbaum. They admitted it. Further to that, all the Soros groups that were kicked out of Hungary, you know, this concept of like he was trying to overthrow the country with by a series of conduits, etc., etc., etc. He wasn't. None of those 200 companies were connected to Soros in any way. It was the Amnesty International and the Red Cross and numerous anti-corruption and human rights organisations. Why would a dictator like Orban is, with a horrible, horrible human rights record and a corruption record, want to kick anti-corruption and anti-human rights and human rights investigative organisations out of his country? Well, it's so he can get away with stuff. It's very obvious. Salvini is basically backed by Cambridge Analytica as well. They admitted it again. They got rid of their website, but they didn't realise that you can actually still find it on the Wayback Machine. And they put a huge amount of money into a Italian organisation, a fringe organisation in the north of the country that had never seen such popularity before 2013. And you look at it, it's like Salvini went from this to this. Salvini was meeting with Trump before Trump was even the candidate. And he was meeting with Breitbart and Robert Mercer and William Regnary and all of these people and the Gatestone Institute in order to get his message out. So it's the same people. It's the same people, the same media, the same billionaires, the same backers backing all these popularist politicians that are selling you this idea in the same way that I've used this analogy before. It's very unpleasant, but in the same way that a paedophile will tell you that there's puppies and ice cream in the back of a van. There's not puppies and ice cream in the back of the van. It's much, much worse in the back of that van, right? But this is the point. It's the most audacious mind control program that I've ever seen. And it involves media, politicians, cults, religious organizations, social media, micro-targeting, quizzes, psychological manipulation, psychological warfare, communications tactics. It involves the intelligence agencies. It involves billionaires, election rigging. It's insane, and it's real.
It's unbelievable. That's the problem, right? Is that the vast majority of the people, 99.9% of them, don't see this. They'll never see it, and it's going to be a very small portion of the population that are going to be able to push back that curtain and see what's behind it, especially to the degree, Neil, that you're taking us through here. But I did want to ask you about InfoWars because just to give the audience a little bit of background, like a lot of us in the truth community and the alternative research community, we got started with InfoWars years ago.
Absolutely. I love his old stuff. You're damn right. The Bohemian Grove stuff and Terror Storm was great, and the one on the elections, the Skull and Bones elections, all these police state ones were fantastic.
The DVD he did on Endgame I thought was very good.
Yeah.
But then what I saw, Neil, was I saw the switch thrown.
Yes.
And the switch was thrown when Trump entered into the equation.
The thing is, it's sort of kind of twofold. One, Alex Jones is whether he is John Birch Society or not, he's constantly talked about John Birch Society and extolled it as a positive thing. When Trump was on, he described Donald Trump as more of a John Birch president. He was a John Birch president. Donald Trump's father was in the John Birch Society. John Birch Society is connected to Heritage Foundation, and this is all the same people, and then the CNP. So there is entirely a possibility that it was via that he actually genuinely felt that this was, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, that he believed that these guys are good guys, didn't understand the connection to the Heritage Foundation or didn't care, and just felt that Donald Trump was the right thing. I don't think that. I think he took some money from Robert Mercer, because if you remember, basically he was really sort of hot on Breitbart and Steve Bannon and stuff like that, right up until The Fire and the Fury came out, when basically Bannon became persona non grata. And they certainly, as you say, took a very, very ideological lean to the right, and they started attacking the Democrats rather than, they used to basically say, we're centre, we don't believe in the left or the right wing, they're both the same wings, the same bird, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've noticed that there's a right shift, because I get called a lefty all the time, because I'm pointing out that Donald Trump's bad, the Conservative Party is bad, and all these people are far right, Christian, evangelical, and nutcases connected to disaster capitalists, and they're all bad. And people go, oh, well, you're just a lefty, aren't you? It's like, no. The right wing are in power now. Vote some left wing people back in, and I'll have a go at them. I read my books. I was perfectly happy to have a go at Obama. I was perfectly happy to have a go at Bill Clinton. And if Hillary Clinton would have won, I'd have been rallying against that evil cow right now. Okay, so stop that, because it's such a straw man argument. Just look at the actual evidence, okay, and debate me on the points of the evidence rather than than just going, "Oh, you're a lefty." But that comes from, again, the shift in InfoWars, this concept of libtards and these, whatever, I don't know what you call them. But basically, yeah, there was a total shift. Now, the more controversial, well, not necessarily more controversial, more salacious argument to that that might have influenced Alex Jones's thinking could be that basically this was just about the time he was having that really expensive divorce, wasn't it? So that could have influenced, again, far be it from me to suggest that anything like that could sway someone's belief structure. But it's entirely plausible. But that was the thing. I noticed this as well just prior to this Cambridge Analytica, and I sort of had this in the back of my mind so it all started to fall into place for me. InfoWars go very, very right-wing. Red Ice go very, very right-wing. All of a sudden, we're supporting Donald Trump. We're supporting the president. And that never sat with me because basically I don't care this. He's a man of the people, blah, blah, blah. He's the president. And all of a sudden, just like that, you were tricked into supporting the government and believing that you were somehow anti-establishment. And it's like, what? It's a bait and switch. It's a con. Like, they've constantly Operation Gladio, Combat 18, the Madrid train bombing. It's easier to use right-wing groups and then blame it on left-wing groups simply because on the right wing you have a far narrower ideology that is easier to get people involved with. To get people to be far left, you have to give up all your crap, and people don't want to do that. And so it's easier to get people into this ideology that then can be manipulated on the right wing of the spectrum when it comes to terrorist actions and stuff like that. So again, I've seen that happening, and I was like, hang on, this is very, very, very cagey. And then you started seeing the rise of the greatest story never told, and all those really poorly researched pro-Hitler arguments started resurfacing again, and not just like basically looking and going, you know what? Sometimes in the fog of war, there's lies and discrepancies in facts and stuff like that. No, it was wholesale. Everything you've been told is wrong, and it's like, come on.
Well, with InfoWars, too, one of the things that caught my eye, aside from the narrative just shifting pro-Trump, was that he had people like Steve Pachenik on.
Well, Jerome Corsi, who was Heritage Foundation.
And Roger Stone.
Roger Stone through Stone, what are they called? Who's the guy that nearly went to prison? The other lawyer. Manafort, Black and Stone, the first ever lobbying corporation. Right, Drain the Swamp. Well, if you're draining the swamp, why would you so closely align yourself to the father of lobbying? It makes no sense. It literally makes no sense unless it's a massive con. That's the way it makes sense. But yeah, Jerome Corsi and WND, their Heritage Foundation as well. I forgot to mention that earlier. So Alex Jones just basically turned into, and Paul Joseph Watson went very right wing and stuff like that. Part of it, I think, again, not defending these people, but part of it, I think, was because, and this is going to sound weird, but there was a lull in stuff that happened. Do you know what I mean? Like, there was 9/11, there'd just been Oklahoma, there was Columbine, various other shootings and stuff like that, Virginia Tech, 7/7. And then for a long time, there wasn't really anything that happened. And this was also about the time that YouTube started. And you had a certain amount of people who all of a sudden had a platform and an audience and no material. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, slim pickings, yeah.
Yeah, so many of these things, right, okay, rely on people not actually reading the text.
Yeah.
So some people are very new to this concept and they would go mad because they think that I'm either calling them stupid or basically saying that they were tricked or basically that I'm a shill or that I'm getting money from the Open Society Forum or whatever that bloody thing's called. And I'm a secret lefty infiltrating commie. It's like, don't be daft. Like, just don't be stupid. Aside from anything, right? Okay, people keep saying that. Well, so what? Communism? And it's like, no, you morons. Like, I know about mind control. Right? Why would I want something that's totalitarian? Of course, I wouldn't want that. Okay, but I can also see a grift when it's happening, and that's the point. Have a look at the blogs. I'm rubbish at this. I'm releasing the whole blog as a book soon, and it's going to have an extra chapter at the end that sums everything up and and explains it all, and it's far more easier to take in as a book in the substance of it, but also it's out there as an audio file. Right, it's a $5 for 7 hours of me rabbiting on about this stuff, which you either love or absolutely hate. But so you can go and get that from my website, or you can read the blog for free on the website. Check all the source material. You can look, as I've not made a single thing up. I've got absolutely no reason to make anything up. I don't get anything out of this. In fact, as you say, it's actually stupid. I put off talking about this for ages until I was absolutely 100% sure, because as you say, I know that people are going to go, no, that's not right. This is no. And I say, please, have a look at the evidence. If you don't think I'm right about the evidence, come and chat to me about it politely and point out where I'm wrong, because that's how we learn.
Yeah, I've been to your blog, Neil, and your information that you post and you put up there is very well researched, and so I will vouch for that. I highly recommend that anybody who is having difficulty with this conversation, that they make their way over to the blog. If you really want to discover and explore and get to the truth, then, like Neil said earlier, and I've said on a number of my own shows, you have to go where the research takes you. And sometimes that research takes you to places that you're not comfortable with, because these are things that don't jive with your current position. But if you really want to get to the truth, you're going to have to push through it and take a look at this information. And if you're really a researcher and you're really looking to get under the hood of things, you're going to have to incorporate it into your position or your view. Otherwise, you're subscribing to dogma. You're subscribing to a belief system. I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day if you don't pursue the truth.
And you're absolutely right, Mike. And the irony of it is that is exactly what Cambridge Analytica is designed to do. It's designed to get you angry, to get you into an immovable position, and then to create an echo chamber so that you never challenge those views. And I'll tell you for why. Because if you look at, say, everything that Donald Trump says, or everything that Boris Johnson says, it's designed to hit you in the feels. It's designed to resonate on a gut level, on an emotional level. Why? Well, for two reasons. One, because that's far more effective as a selling point. And two, because if you actually examined anything that they were saying, within very few seconds you can pick it apart as nonsense. And so that's what annoys me, is there's this lack of neutrality. There's this lack of being able to apply the same standards to everybody. And then what pisses me off is that people would say, paradoxically, oh, well, you're a lefty then. No, I'm just applying the same logic that I would apply to Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump, actually.
Yeah, you're just being objective. You're just taking a look at the situation and applying the same rules and the same level of research and the same criteria to him as you would if it were her in office today.
If you don't agree with what I'm saying, it's all right. Just let it wash over you.
A great conversation, Neil, and if you can let everybody know where they can catch up with you online, your blog, or any social media, let us know about that.
On Facebook, obviously, and neilsanders.mindcontrol.com. You can get all my mind control books there, and the book on Manson. You can get the blog that I'm talking about. As I say, this has taken me a good long time to get to grips with, and so I might have been a bit glib with it, because I forget that I've been looking at this for ages. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it is a fact as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, please go there and check out the source material. Check out the blog. If you don't want to read it, because it's about 90,000 words, you can download it as an audio file. It does cost a little bit of money. It's like a $5, but it's like 7 hours, and then there's going to be 3 more hours worth that go on there at some other point. So you get your money's worth. But I am releasing this as a book. Hopefully in the next sort of few weeks, and I'm just waiting for the cover to come back. So yeah, please have a look at that. Also on Amazon, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis is a film with Jonathan Royal, and I'm in it. It's a really, really good film, actually. I'm not just saying that because I'm in it. I watched it the other night and really, really enjoyed it. It's about sort of it harkens back to sort of the old school sort of conspiracy DVDs. It's about an hour and 45 minutes long, a lot of topics covered, but it's also a bit of an exploration of Jonathan Royle, who's the main sort of protagonist in the film. It's quite poignant at times, it's really touching. It's brilliantly directed and edited, and I pop up in there occasionally too. So it's not bad. So yeah, please do check that out.
Well, Neil, a pleasure. And you can come back anytime, as you know. You have an open invite. It's always a great conversation. And this one, I know, will not disappoint.
Right. Well, yes. Well, I hope people take it in the spirit that it's intended. Like, I just found this stuff. Like, I'm not asking for revoking Article 50. I'm not actually asking for Donald Trump to be impeached. I'm not asking for Hillary Clinton to be installed. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying, here's some stuff I've found, and it's horrible, and I'm sorry.
And you're presenting your findings, and you have every right to present your findings. And like you said, look, if it resonates with somebody, then take it with you. If it doesn't, then leave it there. All you're doing is you're looking, you're researching, and presenting your findings. That is it. And it's up to each individual what they want to do with the information. All right, Neil, thank you so much. I know I've kept you longer than we said here, but it's fabulous.
No, rabbiting on.
Okay. We'll talk soon.
All right, Mike. Thank you, man. Always a pleasure, mate.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
And that concludes another Sage or Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the description box below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can find all my social media and web links by visiting my hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to check out my music and album releases. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone with the next show. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Shepherd.